The British Prime Minister is in a vulnerable position. He's taken a real political blow this week as a result of the worst Labour performance in local election history. Now it's losing seats in almost every direction to almost every party. It's the populist right-wing reform that's on a roll. And could Keir Starmer be swept aside by a west wind? Catherine West, a backbench MP for Horsey, who says she will trigger a leadership challenge if he doesn't make clear his intent to go. In a major speech to Parliament tomorrow, she will need 80 MPs in the party to back her. But right now, Keir has told the press he wants to serve a 10-year term. He changes that he promised. He says he thinks he can turn it round, that he won't, quote, walk away. Well, Catherine West doesn't believe that. This is what she told the BBC today.
And if the Prime Minister's speech is not up to scratch tomorrow, and I'm very fair, I will listen to the Prime Minister's speech, but if it's not up to scratch tomorrow, then I'm afraid I will have to take action, which means emailing my colleagues from the Parliamentary Labour Party to request their support and getting the 81 names which are necessary.
Well, Sir Keir has also armed himself with faces from past glory days of Labour governments. Harriet Harman, Gordon Brown, the former Prime Minister, as advisers. The warm embrace of a time Cool Britannia was in vogue. And D. Ream's Things Can Only Get Better was Labour's theme, fitting, perhaps, for Keir's ringside anthem right now.
Teach me not a thing can only get better. It can only get, take it all from me, you know. I know that things can only get better.
A classic. They don't make them like that anymore, or should they? Paul Richards is a speechwriter, columnist, author. His books include How to Be a Spin Doctor, Labour's Revival, How to Win an Election, and Tony Blair, in his own words. Great to have you on the programme tonight. Thank you for joining us, Paul. First thought, will Sir Keir survive this? Should he?
Well, it's an unpopular and unfashionable view right now, but I think he probably will. Actually, and the reason I say that is because the Labour Party in government does not really have a mechanism for getting rid of a sitting Prime Minister without these 81 names of MPs. There's about 400 Labour MPs in the Parliament right now, and I think we've heard noises off from about 20 or 30. And Catherine West, I doubt very much would be able to cobble together 80 tomorrow or the next day to trigger an election. And there's several reasons for that. One is there is not a clear somebody waiting in the wings, as it were. There isn't a clear successor to Keir Starmer like there was when Tony Blair was being harried by Gordon Brown. And of course, a lot of the MPs really want this guy, Andy Burnham, who is a mayor in Manchester, but not a member of Parliament, and they would want him to be the leader. So they would want to wait until such time as he perhaps could become an MP in order to get their guy in. So it's a sort of Mexican standoff. They're all staring at each other saying, well, you go first, but nobody wants to. So I think all of that adds up to the idea that despite the terrible defeat, absolutely awful results in the local elections, Starmer will persist.
Now, to quote LP Hartley, the past is a different country. They did things differently there. We can also just note the past. You said it rarely happens where a fairly not well known, shall we say, a backbencher does something like this. But let me take you back to 1989. It is well known, sort of the ghost of history. The stalking horse candidate, Sir Anthony Mayer, helped in unseating Margaret Thatcher. And I wanted to get your thoughts on Catherine West. Her theory is if any organisation performs badly, she says the boss, the leader, its chair has to go. That's why she says she's sticking with this. It's a point of principle. I've heard another analyst today say, quote, it's like soiling your trousers and changing one's hat. Is it the person or is it the party to blame?
I'm not quite sure of the meaning of that latter metaphor.
As
but
in,
the
if
earlier
you don't get to the root cause of the problem.
No, I don't have to explore it. I'm not sure we need to explore. I'm not sure we need to go into the detail. On the Anthony Mayer point about the idea of a stalking horse.
Yeah.
And I was around in politics at the time. I remember it vividly, actually, in Westminster. The difference is, I think, is that Mrs. Thatcher, obviously a Conservative member of Parliament, and the rules within the Conservative Party in those days of 1989-90 when she went, are very different from the Labour Party's constitutional rules. Also, she had been in government Mrs Thatcher for 10 years at that point. And Keir Starmer's only been in government for 2 years. He's running through a mandate that he was given by the British people just 2 years ago for a 5-year term. And these are local elections, where often in the UK it is the local people's kind of, sometimes the idea is they give the government a bit of a kicking, nothing to do with the issues of the local government, filling in the holes in the road or dealing with the refuse collection and all those things, but actually voting on big national or even international issues. Tony Blair, you mentioned Tony Blair earlier, he suffered similar defeats in local government elections, the loss of multiple councillors from local government, but he carried on and won general election. So the Thatcherite the comparison, I don't think stacks up, just because it was a different party in a different time. I think the other great lesson for Labour is, yes, we did replace Tony Blair with Gordon Brown back in the day, but actually Gordon Brown then went on to lose the general election. So whatever the underlying problems are, swapping the leader does not necessarily fix them. And Labour in the UK, same as left parties all over the world, are confronting these great big issues of populism, of the rise of the Russian threat, and the need to rearm, technological change, the erosion of their voter base, as people no longer identify with one particular party generation after generation. All of those things will still confront Wes Streeting or Angela Rayner or Andy Burnham, or whichever name you put at the top. And another sort of word of warning is that in the UK, the Conservative Party, before the last general election, swapped its leader 3 times. It still got them nowhere, and they ended up going down to a very, very big defeat indeed. So, just swapping around the leaders, not a great idea. And also in the UK, of course, it would affect our bond markets. It would affect the financial situation really badly. Uncertainty is not a good look.
Yes.
So I think the public would punish us even more.
I hear some of those around Keir Starmer and some of those who support Keir Starmer saying that he has a credible message. He just can't seem to get it out there. And if you look at his personal polling ratings right now, they are very low. They're amongst the most unpopular prime ministers on record. And we know leaders get lampooned, but I just want your take here. Let's just take a look at Saturday Night Live UK, how they depict, you might have seen this, Keir Starmer as a result of the May the 7th election. This is how their take from last night.
If my days really are numbered, then I should seize every moment, enjoy every day as Prime Minister, because I've only got 3 years left. Thank you for this wonderful lesson.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm trying to tell you to stand aside and let me take charge of the government.
And I'm minded of something, Paul, in bringing Gordon Brown back with the same thought that he sometimes had issues with how he came across. And I'm since told, since he left Parliament, that he seems a different person. The private Gordon Brown was very different how he seemed to be in public. Is there a different Keir Starmer in private that you know, if you've met him, than there is in public, that we're not getting the message, the vision?
Well, that's a really interesting point. I mean, I think prime ministers, particularly Labour prime ministers, are so worried about putting a foot wrong or saying the wrong thing or upsetting the media or, just sort of letting the party down in some way, that they do become these kind of automaton kind of robotic figures. And what the public crave, and I think that's one of the reasons why the populist Nigel Farage is doing well, is they crave authenticity, the ability to just say what you think in an authentic sounding way, as you might over a pint of beer in the pub. And Keir Starmer does like football, he does like going for a pint of beer in the pub, he does like chatting to his mates and all of those things, but none of that comes through in his sort of official role. And he is sort of a kind of a bureaucratic figure in that way, and the warmth doesn't shine through. And Gordon Brown was the same. I mean, he said I'm not a communicator, I'm not in PR, he used to say. He was a very sound Chancellor of the Exchequer, never really found his feet, I would argue, as Prime Minister, and then liberated from office, has done great things and has a very different persona now. So yeah, it's definitely a phenomenon that the weight of office sometimes weighs people down to the point where we don't really see their true character. But Starmer needs to, he does need to do this. There is a communications challenge. He's trying to do some big things with the economy and the constitution and the public services, but people don't feel it. I've just come out of the election campaign, knocking on lots of doors. People don't see change. They don't see the things that they wanted to see be different in their communities yet. So, he's got 2 or 3 years to prove it. But the ultimate test for any Labour government is deeds, not words. And that test will come at a general election in 2 or 3 years' time. But, if there isn't demonstrable change at that point, then the public will punish us, and rightly so.
A question, a brief thought from you, Paul, and it might be very hard to know. It's like knowing if England will win the World Cup. Will Sir Keir be in position at the next election?
Well, again, I'll start I'll end where I began, which is the unpopular view that I think I probably will be. I can't see a mechanism to get rid of him, and I can't see an obvious contender to replace him, and I don't detect any alternative agenda coming from somewhere else where there's a better idea of how to tackle our underlying problems. So who knows? Like you say, funny things happen. Politics is an unpredictable business, but I think it's entirely possible that the Labour government goes into the next election with Keir Starmer as its leader.
Great to talk to you, Paul. Another bumpy week ahead. Thank you. Paul Richards, speechwriter, columnist, author. His books include How to Be a Spin Doctor, Labour's Revival, How to Win an Election, and Tony Blair, in his own words. Stay with us. We'll be back on Worldview in just a moment.